Can the parties to the contract mention the amount that can be claimed as damage in case of a breach? If the amount is mentioned, does that amount become an ordinary damage or a special damage? When the amount is mentioned, how much can the parties claim? The amount mentioned or amount suffered? Hello everyone, this is Natika Bachawat and today I'm going to discuss with you the different types of damages mentioned in the contract. Can the damages be mentioned in the contract? Yes. Can the damages be mentioned in the contract? Yes. These damages which are mentioned in the contract, are they penalty or liquidated? Are they special damages or ordinary damage? Well, they are not special damage. They are ordinary damage only. Ordinary damage can be claimed even if you have not mentioned it in the contract. But here, the parties have gone one step ahead and not just saying that you can claim the damages, they have also mentioned a certain amount which can be claimed as damage. This is an ordinary damage only. But the parties have taken us extra step ahead saying that we will also mention the damage that can be claimed. So let us say the amount mentioned is 1,000. So this 1,000 becomes the ceiling limit. That is, you cannot, once this amount 1,000 is mentioned in the contract, you cannot claim anything more than this 1,000. So let us say the amount mentioned is 1,000, but the amount suffered is 1,200. This 1,000 is the ceiling limit. So you cannot claim anything more than 1,000. But on the other hand, what happens if the amount suffered is lower? Will I get the entire 1,000? Well, no. The concept of damages is not to make profit. The concept of damages is to make good the loss suffered. So you will only get what you have suffered and never anything more. So that means what? When the damages are already mentioned in the contract, the aggrieved party will get the amount mentioned or suffered, whichever is less, right? So you will only get whatever you have mentioned or suffered, whichever is less. You will never get anything more than that. Now, so I repeat again, this damage which is already mentioned in the contract is a ceiling limit and you cannot claim anything more than this. So the aggrieved party will get the amount mentioned or suffered, whichever is less. Now this 1,000 becomes the ceiling limit. As I said, that is, you cannot claim anything more than this. Now this 1,000 rupees which is already mentioned in the contract can either be a penalty or it may be a liquidated damage. Now when I say penalty, what do I mean by penalty? Penalty means to penalize someone. Now, when I want to penalize someone, I will never be lenient with my punishment. I'll be very strict, right? Very harsh. So penalty means the parties, they don't even try to figure out what could be the damage. Nothing. Random, they mention a very high amount. There is literally no connection between the amount mentioned and suffered. Random, they just put a very high amount in the contract as damage. They literally put a very high amount as damage in the contract which has no connection with the real damage suffered. This is what? Penalty. The parties mention a very high amount. Let us say we say in case of breach, I'll claim 5 lakh rupees, 10 lakh rupees. Now, this 5 or 10 lakh has literally no relation with the real damage suffered. So this becomes what? Penalty. So when the parties mention a very high amount in the contract as damage, which is not at all near to the actual damage suffered, it's a penalty. Now when I say liquidated, the word liquidate means to convert in terms of money. So what is liquidated damages? The parties try to calculate, they try to figure out, they try to make a pre-estimation of the damage. That is, the parties try to figure out that if tomorrow there is a breach, what could be the damage that we would suffer? If tomorrow there is a breach, what could be the damage that we would suffer? Obviously, it cannot be exactly the same, but it is something which is very near to the actual damage suffered. Right? It's a pre-estimation, very near to the damage suffered. So, it cannot be, as I said, exactly how can I make a pre-estimation which is exactly correct? But something very near to the actual damage suffered. So penalty is a very high amount which is nowhere near to the actual damage suffered, whereas liquidated damages, the parties try to figure out what could be the damage in case of breach. Let us say A says to B, I want you to repair my flat. Right? Hires B to repair the flat and mentions to B that the work must be completed within 3 months. The work must be completed within 3 months. So he has given a time period to B that please complete of this work, repair the flat within 3 months. And he also mentions that if you fail to do so, I will claim from you the rent I would have earned, or I will claim from you 3 times the rent I would have earned. Right? He says that I would claim from you the rent I would have earned or 3 times the rent I would have earned. Now, if the work is not complete within 3 months, if it was completed in 3 months, you would have given it on rent and you would have earned the rent. So, if the work is not completed within 3 months, what could be the damage that you would suffer? You would suffer the rent that you would have earned. So, pre-estimated damage here is the rent I would have earned. That would have been the normal damage that you would have suffered. So, rent I would have earned is what? Liquidated damage. You would have suffered the rent you would have earned. 3 times the rent is something which is very high, nowhere near to the actual damage suffered. So, this is what? This is penalty. So I repeat again, penalty is something very high that we mention in the contract as damage, whereas liquidated damages, the parties try to figure out what could be the probable damage. However, whatever you mention, you will only get what you have suffered, or whatever is mentioned, whichever is less. But here, one thing to be understood, if you have made a contract with the government, okay, if you have made the contract with the government and you breach the contract, then the government has a right to claim whatever damage is mentioned. Right? If a contract is made with the government and you breach that contract, in that case, the government will not claim the damage suffered. They have a right to claim the entire penalty. So if they have mentioned that for every day of delay, they will claim 5 lakh rupees. Obviously, 5 lakh rupees cannot be the damage for every day. But still, the government has a right to claim the 5 lakh. So I repeat again, damages already mentioned in the contract is an ordinary damage where the amount is mentioned. The agreed party will get the amount mentioned or suffered, whichever is less. Penalty, this may be either penalty or liquidated damage. Penalty means something which is very high, nowhere near to the actual damage suffered, whereas liquidated damage is the parties try to figure out the probable damage that they would suffer. Obviously, it's not necessarily will be exactly the same. However, the parties will only get what they have suffered or whatever is mentioned, whichever is less. But in case of government contract, the government has a right to claim the entire penalty. So I hope this video helps you to differentiate between penalty and damages. Thank you. Happy learning and stay motivated.